let's say, expenditures they like to make. I know you've mentioned before how much they have an affinity towards handmade goods, jewelry and pianos and wooden things and furs and nice things. Would you say then that the majority of reptilians are doing pretty well economically, and that if they're going to be mingling with us or trying to divulge from us, like how is that having an impact?
Well, I'd say the average reptilian is actually doing worse than they have a more stratified economic system. Warrior class, the worker class. They're merchants, and the wealthier reptilians do very well. They're poor, they don't starve or anything, and they have medical care and they have housing, but it tends to be much smaller. They're much more. They're used to having the thing we're headed for in our society. Micro condos, micro apartments, that kind of thing, which is normal for most advanced species. You look at cities in Asia where everyone's crowded. You get used to the mentality of okay, it's crowded. I have tiny living space. That's fine. This is normal. So that kind of is the future, so to speak. But what's happening in this country, it's going to lead to an increasing amount of unrest, especially because our phone technology, our cell phone technology, keeps getting cheaper and more powerful, and that enables crowds and protests to come together so quickly and overwhelm police. You've seen in the last 10 years.
And they don't like that.
Well,
do they not like that?
They see the inevitability of how it's going to cause instability, where, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, we have more of a French Revolution type thing coming up, but that would have been even worse if people back then had some equivalent of cell phones and could communicate, where all the peasants could communicate instantly. And
right. So I suppose that's my question then. Are they against or for our civil unrest?
Well, they don't want it to get to the point where it's like the French Revolution terror, where it just, mass death, and like we saw in Syria. Syria, before it turned into a civil war, it started just as protests against the government. Same thing as Libya, same thing as Egypt. It just started as protests, got out of control. Next thing, you got a massive civil war, massive death. So it doesn't mean that the concerns of the protesters aren't valid. They are. They're very valid. But they know, just from history, and any human knows as well, that it ends up going really far, going over the cliff, and then suddenly the whole society.
And we're chopping people's heads off. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
but they do want a little bit of turmoil. Then it sounds like they don't want complete peace.
Yeah. Do they feed off of the chaos? Is that true, or is that just something that we know?
I don't believe that they feed off of chaos. I believe that what reptilians have communicated to a lot of abductees is they intended, like Egypt, the civilization they created, not like modern Egypt, to be like a permanent thing. Whenever they've created one of these ancient civilizations, they didn't intend for it to collapse. They keep trying to kickstart these ancient, really highly intelligent.
I don't think any of us intend for any of our civilizations to collapse. That's the thing.
And we always have trouble keeping it going, and they keep trying to initiate it, and that's. Yeah, the paradox of reptilians, they're aggressive, territorial, but also if you look in ancient history, they're always teaching. They're always the teachers and the educators. And why are they educating people if they're also kind of predatory and dominating? Well, they have a very hierarchical brain, very sort of reptilian hierarchical brain, and that causes them to enjoy teaching. It causes them to enjoy, having a bunch of natives that are teaching how to do something because they feel like the smartest person in the room. Whereas a gray alien or a Nordic alien would just get frustrated. And they often do. You see grays have humans board their ships and they're asking questions. How does this work? What does this thing do? And the gray's like, look, I have no time to explain this. I've got, Oh,
hello?
Oh, no.
Hello?
Damn it.
Oh, shit. That was at a really good part, too.
Oh, damn it.
Oh, he's here. No.
I'm still here.
Matt?
Yeah.
Okay, yay.
I got him.
Oh, thank God.
I had to decline a phone call. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries.
No
We all just held our breath for a second. But yes, we were talking about how the Greys are probably frustrated with, I don't have time for your questions. I know this stuff.
Right. Well, you look at the Herbert Schirmer abduction, where he was a police officer. He was taken aboard a reptilian craft. His last name Schirmer, I believe. And yeah, they're giving a tour of the ship and a tour of the star map. And Greys generally don't do that, but you see this with reptilians, they're okay with educating people because it does make them feel a bit smarter, or like the smartest person.
They're almost like they're happy to give a tour to be like, oh, thank you for being interested in what we have to teach you. We have the time and the resources to let you know what's going on, and we appreciate you being so scared of us.
It's almost reminiscent of the original abduction, Betty Hill. Didn't she get wasn't one of her big proofs that she was given a star map when she returned?
Yeah, she saw one when she was up there.
Okay. Yeah, I think she was able to recreate it too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
well,
that's why we call them the Reptilians.
The funny thing about the Betty Hill is they were showing her about trade routes and how a lot of goes along trade routes, and that is something consistent.
That sounds like a lot of information to give to a lady like that.
Well,
that's like the prequels.
Yeah, most space travel, most aliens, they travel on busy routes, and there's a lot of trade, and they use a lot of the same ports. You don't have.
Oh yeah. So it, like people have mentioned before, it's a lot like being at a truck stop, and so the people there are going to be a little bit more travel worn and willing to talk to other people because they're so starved for interaction with other life forms at that point.
Well, this is how species end up working with each other. Why you see Greys and Reptilians and Nordics aboard the same ships quite often. You know, they pick them up just in these ports, like, hey, I need a mechanic, or I need, a pilot, or God knows what else. Because people aren't going to create their own port. You're not going to have like Nordics and Reptilians and Greys creating their own space ports. They could in theory, but it's easier to just say, okay, this port, someone already created this port. I'm just going to stop here. And it kind of gets funneled. I think it's also a mechanical issue where if you're traveling along a busy, sort of space highway and you have a problem, someone's going to come along, at some point. I mean, that's basically what happened in the Travis Walton abduction, where he kind of overwhelmed these small Greys on a ship. Or they didn't use, anesthetic on properly. And some Nordic aliens had to come aboard the ship and coax him off and give him back to the Greys. And had that Nordic ship not come, if you read the actual Travis Walton
book.
Had those Nordics not come aboard and helped and brought the smaller ship into their larger ship, it might have crashed after we kind of overwhelmed these Greys and ran wild on their ship. So that's the alliance between aliens. It's not like a alliance of ideas, or that they have the same attitudes or same culture. It's just more of a convenience, being in the same area. I was about to say
the word convenience. Yeah, like it's just like, hey, we're here, you're here. When you're driving by somebody on the side of the road that has a flat, like, hey, I happen to have an extra spare. Why not? You're just being kind. It's not like it was planned it's not like a planned, partnership. It just, they're not evil and they're good.
It's and
it sounds like
in my abductions, I'll tell you, I don't remember I can tell you about the one time I have seen a Grey, and that is also the only medical type abduction I recall waking up for. And this happened almost a year ago. And I woke up in this underground, I believe it was underground, but I'll tell you, the room I was in, it looked like being in a doctor's office or a dentist's office. The ceiling wasn't too far away. The architecture of the room was like being, in the room of a hospital or a dentist's office. There's a lot of lights. There were human doctors. There was one Grey doctor. There was a large reptilian there as well. And I wake up and I'm cut, like my arm, I could see like my bicep, my arm is kind of like is cut open, and they're working on something. But when I wake up, they have me on some kind of anesthesia that's causing me, I'm trying not to laugh. Like whatever they have me on, it's not like laughing. I didn't have like
fun stuff,
yeah. But I'm just like suppressing the urge to laugh and just trying not to laugh. And I'm thinking at the same time, like, what the hell am I, feeling like laughing, but trying not to laugh? Because when you're cut open, you don't want to, move stuff around. You don't want.
Yeah.
It's also kind of weird, like embarrassing. Like I don't want to laugh when they're doing it. It was very weird and conflicting. But they were putting this substance into me that, remember, do they still make those breath strips where like it's a rectangle that dissolves on your tongue? Those clear.
Those Listerine breath strips.
Oh yeah. My wife loves this.
They still
imagine
hurt.
one of those, but more like the size of your bicep.
Whoa.
Okay.
Like an icy hot
That takes
patch.
a pretty wide tongue.
Yeah, like an icy hot patch, but they're putting it literally like under your skin on top of the muscle.
Ooh, ouch. Under your skin?
It took me, and I wake up in the morning, and the first thing is, and towards the end of the experience, this one reptilian there, he gives me this telepathic idea, like, well, you could use that not as intended. And I'm like, what the hell? It's coming back not as intended, because I get the impression that this was predominantly a human military controlled or run operation. And you see a lot of this with, abductees where the military is doing biological experiments. Yeah, MyLabs type of thing. Even though there was a reptilian in the room and there was a gray in the room, but there was like 3 or 4 humans in the room too, like in, the operating room type garb. And I do research. I'm like, what the hell would they be doing with muscle and this rectangular piece of tissue they're putting? What the hell could that be? I do so much research online. I finally find, the Pentagon. I was, Googling muscle transplant because I'm thinking you can't transplant muscle tissue. But guess what? They've been doing it for like 5 years. There's this. Oh, you can Google this yourself. Muscle transplant pig bladder. They were used, the Pentagon was pig bladder cells, putting them into troops who have been injured in battle, who've lost like chunks of muscle.
Oh my God.
And, just Google pig bladder muscle transplant. And and when they transplant, the transplant process, I looked up video, and it's the same thing. They process it, do a rectangular sheet, and just put it in there right on top of the muscle. But it's not, the rectangular sheet kind of dissolves. That's why I used like the breast strip analogy. So imagine like a dissolving sheet of, they call it tissue engineering. And they engineer with like hydrogel. So they put under your skin on top of the muscle. And no, first, okay, why don't I have like, deep scars from this? They use this technology, and this is something they used back at the mall. During the mall training, other people who were there, as Joe Montalvo's talked about, who were cut open, they have a technology where if you're cut, they can heal the cut, and there's no scar, but it has to be a fresh cut. So, and they gave me that impression too. It's like it zippers the cells back together. But let's say you got like stabbed a day ago, and you show up to them with you're going to have a scar. So it has to be a fresh cut. Okay. And if it's a fresh cut, they have this thing that can heal it, and you'll see like maybe if you got a microscope, you'd see it, but it looks like without a scar. So
does that use like a laser?
Yeah, but my consciousness through this surgery was literally just like 10 seconds. So I wake up, I see myself cut open. The reptilian gives me that thought, and from that point forward, I either fell back asleep or they knocked me back out somehow. So I don't remember them heal. I just remember seeing that one part of the surgery. Okay. But what's amazing is this process. If you look at the pig bladder muscle transplant, that same thin rectangular sheet of processed tissue, exactly like they put in me, except in my case, they were using cloned reptilian cells, not pig bladder cells. But clearly, whatever Pentagon project was doing that with the pig bladder and the muscle, and this is open, you can go Google it yourself, find the regular news. It's attached to the same project to use these cloned cells. And this ties into, have you seen Emery Smith? You got David Wilcock, you got Corey Good, and there's other whistleblower, Emery Smith. Mm-hmm. A lot of people attack. He claims he was part of this project underground, working with alien tissues and alien cells. And he'd sit in a room, and they'd just give him every day just fresh samples, just trays of alien cells to work on. He didn't know if they're coming from crashes or where you getting all these alien tissues from. And I'll tell you where they're cloning them. But what makes Emery Smith's story believable is that he was so compartmentalized that they would not tell him where those tissues were coming from or where they were going. And they were going into people like me. Because that's what you do. If you're really part of a Black Ops project, you compartmentalize someone's knowledge so they just see one part of that pie, and they can't, they don't know where the tissue came from or where it's going. And if he was making it up, he would have a whole story where here's where it came from and here's where it's going. And all he knows is the middle. And that makes so much sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're trying to bury their lead, like, well, good luck trying to find out patient 0 and everything. You're not going to be able to find that out.
and I wouldn't even necessarily believe his story